Welcome to the very first episode of this podcast. Hi, my name is Jo.
And I'm Mom.
And this is Mondays with Mom, a podcast where we dive into different topics with my mom, get into her life stories, and gather some wisdom along the way. Think of this as a mix of a cozy coffee chat and a stand-up comedy show with a side of heartfelt reflection. My mom and I are very close. She's probably one of my best friends. We confide in each other, laugh together, spend so much time together. And I've always said, Mom, that your life gives Hollywood scripts a run for its money. Have I not?
Totally.
And this is our way of sharing it all with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mom, a.k.a. Leah. And I'm really, really excited to be doing this podcast. It's something I've wanted to do forever. I have so many stories to tell that will keep everyone entertained and interested. And I've always kind of wanted to get my story out there. I kept thinking it should be a book, it should be a movie, but I've never really been able to find anyone that could write it for me. And so until we get to that point, I thought we're going to start off this way and get my story out there. And
I think as long as I can remember, you've been asking for one of us to write a book. One of us being me or my sister, of course. Someone to write a book, produce a movie, anything. And this is just the beginning of hopefully everything.
Absolutely. So,
what are we going to talk about for our first episode ever?
Well, considering our podcast is Mondays with Mom, I thought maybe we can start this off with talking about moms.
So that's a good topic.
I've always known from when I was very young that I wanted to be a mom. One of the things that was always in my plan for life. And funny enough, I have been really, really blessed because I've always wanted 2 daughters. And that's exactly what God gave me. So before we even go ahead, firstly, I want to say thank you for doing this. And secondly,
You're welcome.
Thank you. And
thank you for joining me.
Very happy to be here. And I also just want to put it out there how absolutely proud I am of you and how totally blessed I am to have you and Tina as my daughters.
What an opener. I hope I can live up to that.
I have no doubt. I think being a mom has been very important to me because when I was growing up, I ended up having 2 moms. So,
what do you mean by that?
Well, my own mom, who was quite desperate to have children as soon as she got married and got married at 18, had my sister at 19 and had me at 21, was basically practically a kid still when she had her children. And immediately, she was an only child. She called on her mom, my grandmother, to help out. And so along the way, I ended up many times with 2 moms. So when I was 3 years old, my parents left. I was born in Greece, by the way, which you know, but I'm putting it out there. When I was 3, my parents left Greece and went to go live in South Africa. And my mom, having been brought up in Greece where she had never ever seen an African person in her life or had barely seen anyone who was a dark skin beyond the Greek olive skin, arrived in South Africa. And this was a bit of a shock to her system.
I'm sure.
She kind of looked around and said to my dad, I don't know any of these people. I don't know that I want to be here. I don't know if I'm going to get along with them. And my mom absolutely loved jewelry, as you know. And
huge jewelry fan.
Huge jewelry fan.
Bedazzled from head to toe.
There you go. And so my dad decided to try and convince her that South Africa is an awesome place to live in. He went.
Which, to be fair,
yes.
It kind of is.
Well, I mean, at the time, she didn't know this. And so he went out and bought her this giant carat diamond ring, golden diamond ring, and said to her, look what you get in South Africa that you couldn't really afford in Greece. So my mom was really excited about this ring, already feeling good about South Africa, and just complained a bit that this ring was a little bit big for her. And my dad...
You want to lose a ring like
yeah.
that.
Well, my dad kind of said to her, you know what? Don't stress too much about that. Wear it for a week, and on the weekend, we'll go and have it resized. So at the time, they'd lived in South Africa for 3 months.
Wow.
And because my parents couldn't afford 2 cars, my dad had a car and he'd go to work.
When was this?
Oh, golly, now you asked me to give away my age. Okay.
Okay. We can keep it more
All right,
vague.
let's keep it vague.
Give a decade.
Okay, it was in the early 70s. Lord
Okay.
help me. Okay, all right, I've given away my age. I can't believe she's done this on the first
Sorry.
episode. Okay, guys, I'm 54. All right, just to put it out there. Okay. Anyway, so because my parents couldn't afford...
I'm going to redact it.
There we go.
Sound over the word.
Because my parents couldn't afford 2 cars, my dad had a car and my mom used a bus to go to work. So 3 months after arriving in South Africa and my mom kind of standing there proudly at the bus stop with her new ring, 4 African men approached her with knives and threatened to cut off her finger if she didn't give them the ring. Now, remember, I told you guys the ring was too big. But in her kind of state of shock and panic and adrenaline going through her body, her fingers swelled up and this ring wouldn't come off. And these guys threatened to cut off her finger.
I'd be terrified.
Can you just imagine? 3 months.
3 months into a new country. Wow.
And so there are these, on that day, as luck or God put his hand in the situation would have it, my dad realized he had left and gone to work and realized that he had left some important papers at home that he needed and came home to fetch them, and on the way happened to drive past the bus stop and saw these 4 guys kind of pulling at my mom and took his car and kind of went straight for them. They scattered and...
What a hero.
Yeah, what a hero. And my mom ended up with her ring still.
I'm sure she didn't even want to wear it after that experience, though.
Totally petrified. But what happened is she called her mom. And my mom was an only child. And she called her mom, who was living in Greece, and said, "You're actually not going to believe the place he brought me to. This is what they do, and it's not safe at all. And you think you can have jewelry, but then you can't wear the jewelry." So as any good Greek mom would do, as my grandma did, what do you do when your child says they're having a rough time? You quit your job, you leave your house, you just pack your bags and get yourself to South Africa. Yes. So my grandparents arrived in South Africa, and I mean, already that was quite a story, because in those days, the South Africans were very, very strict. They didn't want the original people that had kind of come into South Africa didn't want lots of white people in South Africa. They actually wanted themselves, and they kind of wanted to rule over the majority. It was in the days of apartheid. And so what they would do is, in order to, unless you had a job lined up, which my parents did, and that's how they got there, for my grandparents to come into South Africa at those days, I mean, I suspect my grandfather was in his mid-50s or heading towards 60, and my grandmother was 17 years younger than him, and she was a housewife. But
he was fully Greek, both of them.
Totally fully Greek. They insisted...
They didn't know English either.
Not even a word of English. But all they knew was that their daughter was there and in trouble, and they were going. So they had to learn 5 words in Afrikaans in order to be allowed.
Imagine that, just 5. These days it probably is a lot more.
These days you probably have to do a proficiency test. And so there were 5 words in Afrikaans, and I always remember these 5 words because they were very, very funny. So
could they pick any words they wanted?
They could pick any 5 words they wanted. And I mean, my gran learned them. It took a lot of training to get my grandfather to say these words, but they did. So they eventually picked, their first word was hunt, which is the Afrikaans word for hand. It was close enough to hand, and they could do it. The second word is skuna, which my grandmother took a Greek take on and called it skuna, but that was close enough.
What does skuna mean?
It means shoes.
But is there a Greek equivalent?
There isn't a Greek equivalent, but she kind of gave that like a Greek slant to it, so she was able, exactly, a Greek je ne sais quoi. And then for her third word, she put the 2 words together, the hunt and skuna, and formed one word, huntskuna, which, lucky for her, is the Afrikaans word meaning gloves. So the Afrikaans people call gloves shoes for hands. So she had the word number 1 was hunt, word number 2 was skuna, or as my gran would say, skuna. And then the third word was huntskuna.
Huntskuna, so that's 3 words so far.
The fourth word, which is in Afrikaans means don't. Lucky for my gran, in Greek means fanny. So the word... We
might have to bleep that out.
Yes, we might have to bleep that out, but the intonation is slightly different. So in Greek, the word muni means fanny, And all my gran had to do was change this and say muni, which means don't in
Also kind of
Afrikaans.
sounds like a weird way to say money.
There you go. And for the fifth word, they picked a word which, I mean, in Afrikaans means treasure, which is skat or skati, and in Greek means piece of SH1T. So skati, again, the intonation. So my grandmother had a good laugh with
I
this.
think maybe Afrikaans speakers are going to come for our pronunciation.
Probably. But so those were their 5 words. And they ended up being allowed to come to South Africa. And so for most of my life growing up, I had my parents and my grandparents living with us. So having my grandmother there, who was basically mom number 1, I would say, because she was the stay-at-home mom. She was the mom that would be nurturing and making us breakfast every day. And when we came home from school, there was lunch, and then cooking for us all the time, and kind of looking after us and being nurturing. And then my mom, who was more of the go-getter, a businesswoman, moving up the ranks in the bank. I mean, I was extremely proud of my mom. She began in South Africa as a bank teller and ended up as sub-manager of the bank, which she did all on her own.
Wow.
So it was kind of awesome for me because I had, with the 2 of them together, I kind of had the perfect mom.
Lots of like good role models.
Absolutely.
It must have been a crowded household. Like you and grandparents and your parents and your sister.
It was a really
Or
crowded
my aunt.
household.
My aunt.
Yeah. So the bathroom was not a good place in the mornings. It really, really
You only
wasn't.
had one bathroom?
My parents had a bathroom en suite in their bedroom, but theirs didn't have a shower. It only had a bath. So they would come to the bathroom that everyone else shared to shower in. And so this bathroom was, people could like kill each other to get into the bathroom. So the bathroom was like a huge thing. But because I grew up with the 2 moms like that, I always had the perfect mom.
I think I also grew up with 2 moms. I have that same thing. Well, I mean, I have you, and then I had the woman who was like my nanny growing up.
Right.
So I think I had the similar experience.
Toko was definitely a mom.
Yeah.
And then also you had the blessing of having your aunt round the corner.
And my aunt, yeah.
Which was also,
And my grandmother.
and you had your grandmother.
So a very like matriarchal family, I would say.
And for a tiny bit of time, you actually had my grandmother as
Yeah.
well. So, all of that really, really helped. So, I mean, my grandmother came to South Africa, and it was quite sweet because within quite a short period of time, we lived in a neighborhood called Lombardy East, and everybody started knowing her. And in fact, everyone would walk past her in the streets, and everyone would just call her Granny. Hello, Granny. Hello, Granny. Granny. Everyone knew Granny. People would stop me in the street and say, how's Granny? And my favorite part was the way my grandfather would say it. And he'd say, Granny. Puni Granny, which means where is Granny? And everybody just knew her as Granny.
Oh, that's
or
so sweet.
sometimes as Yaya. And I think, though, having the 2 moms kind of shaped who I am, but also at the same time helped me to become a little bit of a sport brat. So one of the things that would happen, because my mom would work, she was working at the bank, as I said, and every Saturday morning she would work, every second Saturday she would work, she would drop us off at this giant supermarket, or what we would call in those days a hypermarket. And this hypermarket was kind of had all your food stuff, and then had this really cool little restaurant where you could have breakfast or brunch in the meantime.
I wonder if that was just like a South African thing, or if other places would have that similar vibe. Because I don't think I've ever heard of a hypermarket here in Greece.
Well, I guess your Alpha Vita here, the giant one, might have like a coffee shop outside that you can get cheese pies, that kind of thing. So it's becoming that way. But in South Africa, this was one of the very first giant ones and was really, really well known. And I'll give you an example of what happened to make me a sport brat is that I used to blame my ex-husband, we'll get into that another time, for making me indecisive.
This will introduce too many topics.
Not too many topics, okay. But I realized that I'm kind of indecisive of my own accord. And I have a bit of FOMO as well. And I kind of I've got issues where if I see exciting things, I kind of need to try them all out. I want to taste everything, try everything. And so despite the fact that there was,
got that too.
You do have that. I mean, I unfortunately have passed that on to you. I passed that on to you. And lucky for me that despite the fact that I grew up in South Africa during apartheid and there were sanctions and this, that, the other, the South African economy was still doing really, really well at that time. And also there was still a lot of food stuff and exciting things available that you could choose from. So one of my examples of being a sport brat is I remember we would go to this, it was like the highlight twice a month that we would go to this place with my grandmother. And I'll explain later on where my grandmother was getting her money from. But
it's like all these different like tangents.
Yes, exactly.
But that's why we're doing this.
So what she would do is we would go to this hypermarket, and it was the most exciting thing ever. And we would sit there and go through different aisles. Okay, initially we'd go buy all the boring stuff like the meat and the potatoes and the vegetables. And then she would take us down the jam and sweet aisles and milk sweeteners and the breakfast cereals. And so we would stand in front of them and we'd start off with the cereals. And my sister, being totally different to me and being someone who doesn't like lots of new things and sticks to what she knows, she had this breakfast cereal that she really liked called Honey Smacks. And every Kellogg's one, and every single time we would go and we'd stand in front of the cereal counter, and my grandmother would look at my sister, who was eldest, first and say to her, go ahead and choose whichever cereal you want. And my sister would proudly walk up to the Honey Smacks, take it and bring it back to the trolley. And my grandmother would say, now it's your turn, go and choose any cereal you want. And I would sit there and my eyes would fill with tears. My grandmother would look at me confused.
Not dramatic at all.
Not dramatic at all. And she'd say,
crying over cereal.
She'd say, what's wrong? She'd say, why are you crying? You can have any cereal you want. And I would say to her, but Gran, I can choose Frosties, or I can choose Strawberry Pops, or I can choose Cocoa Pops, or I can choose cornflakes.
I think the real problem here is that you considered cornflakes an option.
Well, okay.
What kid says, oh, Frosted Flakes
and there was that
cornflakes.
Other one that had the cow. What do you call those? Those were like
those clusters.
Oat clusters, chocolate.
I think that is very South African. I don't know. Moo clusters. I don't know.
And I would sit there with my eyes brimming with tears, and one little tear would kind of leak out the side of my eye. And my grandmother would say, why are you crying, my baby? You can have any one you want. And I'd say, yeah. I actually don't know which one to choose. And she'd look at me and say, you know what? Don't worry, my baby. Go get one of each.
Wow.
And so
I want to know why you haven't let me do this.
Well, did I mention the sport brat part? So the exact same thing would happen in front of the chocolate aisle. My sister would go and pick one type of chocolate, and I would be going for the bar ones and the lunch bars and the Astros and anything you could think of. So, I mean, the fact that I didn't end up morbidly obese is like, I had no idea.
Yeah. South Africa really had good chocolates.
South Africa really had good chocolates. I mean, the other thing she used to do...
I don't know, like, what is Nestle and Cadbury? Like, I don't know why they don't make them more global. There's like lunch bar, everything.
And even, I mean, the other thing that I remember that was one of my favorite things was the Nesquik milk flavors.
Oh, yeah, those were good.
And I don't even think
they're discontinued now.
I know.
To only chocolate.
And so that would make my sister happy because she would always choose the chocolate. And me, after a tear out the left eye and the right eye brimming with tears, would end up getting strawberry, banana, bubble gum, lime. And I mean, it was just...
Bubble gum was my favorite when it was around. And lime.
And cream soda. So, I mean, I had the absolute best childhood that way. The other thing I got from both my moms, but I think even more my grandmother, which I think is also something that's kind of shaped my life in a big way, is my belief in God.
You know, on the one hand, it's the Nesquik, and the other hand is...
So like these profound things. And I don't know, Joe, how well you remember this story, because of the way I was brought up and how important God was in my life. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know that I try to make it important in your life too.
Yeah.
And the one thing I remember is kind of drumming it into my children, you and Tina, that God can do absolutely anything. And he performs
That's
miracles. True. And I'll never forget the one occasion where you were 5 and Tina was 3. And we ended up getting stuck on the highway. Do you remember that one?
No.
Okay.
I think I blanked that out of my memory because of how traumatizing it must have been.
Okay, well, there we were in South Africa, not a very nice area.
Not that I would have known. I don't think I realized.
My car just suddenly turned off while I was driving on the highway or the freeway. And I kind of pulled over to the side and tried to turn the car on again. And
wait, did you say freeway?
I did, for people that don't get highways.
Okay.
And because a lot of people don't call it a highway. That's a South Africanism.
Really?
Yes, people call them freeways.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I remember pulling off to the side of the road and trying to start this car, and this car just wouldn't start. And I checked. I hadn't done my usual of forgotten to put in petrol or something like that. And yet this car wouldn't start. Later on, I was told by the car mechanic that somehow the car's key recognition system had failed.
Wow.
So the car just decided while driving that, sorry, I don't recognize this key anymore, so I'm not going with this car.
Crazy.
And so what had happened was we stopped on the side of the road, and now I was trying not to let you guys know that I was panicking. And it was a time where my parents were away on holiday and my sister was away, and it was just us. And I had no idea how I was going to handle this. And the two of you and your sister, kind of looked at me and as if I had lost the plot somehow and said, "Mom, why are you getting worried?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you've told us God can do anything. So all you have to do is sit down, pray, and God will start the car." And I remember thinking, oh, Lord, what have I done? And I thought to myself,
I can just imagine. Like,
I thought, now I've gone and I'm going to destroy my children's faith altogether. Because my children were saying to me, "Mom, don't be an idiot. All you have, why didn't you think of praying? All you have to do is sit down and pray and the car will start." So the three of us sat down and prayed, and I think I was double praying with you guys and praying in the back of my head saying, "Lord, do something because this is going to be bad." And lo and behold,
the final countdown.
We held hands, we prayed, and I get back in the car thinking, oh no, there goes my children's faith. Turn the key and the car suddenly starts. As soon as we arrived home, the car went dead again, and I did have to take it to a mechanic and sort out the key recognition. But, that was a huge thing.
It's pretty insane. Although it is also funny how we started with cereals and we ended up with praying in the car.
That's kind of the story of my life.
Yeah, the dualities of your life.
Yes.
So I think we can stop it here for this episode, at least for now. That was, I think, a very good introduction to your chaotic, unpredictable, all over the place life.
Right.
From cereal aisles to your faith.
To getting stuck on highways.
To moving from Greece to South Africa.
And bottom line is, I'm very grateful to God for having my moms. And also very grateful to God for making me a mom of my 2 awesome girls.
Maybe that's something we can do for future episodes. Add a little bit of gratitude at the end.
That sounds good. And on that note, I'm really, really grateful that we've got our first podcast episode out there. And I'm really grateful to you, Jo, for doing this.
Oh, well, I'm grateful to you too. This has been years in the making at this point. But I'm really excited that we're finally doing this.
Me too. Very, very excited.
It's a good first step in the right direction. And on that note, join us next week for another episode of Mondays with Mom. With me, Jo, and my mom. And you.